Welcome to the forum at All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, especially a warm welcome to those of you who have joined us online. This program, it's one in a line of presentations that we have developed over the years, in fact, at the forum stretching back 80 years. The forum at All Souls has operated since 1943 to provide a platform for the discussion of significant issues in the contemporary world. Today's presentation is a capstone of a series of events we've put together on preventing youth suicide and bullying, and in particular, cyberbullying among youth. The series was developed by members of the Music Committee as well as members of the Forum Committee, and it was made possible by funding from the endowment of the Friends of the Forum. And we are appreciative to those forward-thinking people and their generosity in setting up this endowment that makes these joint endeavors possible. Our speaker this morning is Jane Clementi from the Clementi Foundation in New Jersey. She is a nurse and a mother, and that's really all I'm going to say because we want to give her as much time as possible. Please welcome Jane.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I want to also thank Anthony Edwards, as well as all of the members for hospitality. It's been a great day and a half so far. I hope it continues through till tomorrow. I'm sure it will. So as I was introduced, my name is Jane Clementi. I use she, her pronouns, and I am one of the co-founders and now the CEO of the Tyler Clementi Foundation. Our mission on the Tyler Clementi Foundation is to end online and offline bullying in schools, workplaces, and faith communities. We started the foundation to raise awareness around the Tyler situation and also to find research-based solutions to the issues that impacted Tyler. For those of you who might not remember or who might not remember the stories of Tyler, but Tyler did raise a lot of headlines. But what people didn't know from those headlines was the person behind the story. So I do like to share and start off always by focusing on Tyler, because that's why I'm here today. And my clicker's not working, so maybe the slide can be advanced. Am I holding it? No. Oh, there. Oh, you missed pictures of Tyler, though. Go back one more. Yes, those are some pictures that I like to capture of Tyler. And just to show that and make him human, because he wasn't just those headlines. I like to point out that he had a very quiet and uneventful childhood. We were a family that never sought out attention. I personally, and Tyler also, never really liked to be in the front of the room and liked more to be in the middle, not in the back, not in the front, just like in the middle to blend in, to feel connected. He was very curious. He loved to explore and plan new adventures, build things. As you can see, some of his great creations there was his Tinker toys that he built a music stand out of those Tinker toys. That's what I think those were called. I guess we knew then we needed to buy a music stand for him and a violin stand. He certainly told us what we wanted, and he was very persistent with those ideas. He, of course, had many interests in life, like all of us do. But I think if I have to look back and call out one passion he had, I would say that it was music. And especially that he loved to perform. As I said, he didn't like attention on him, but if he had his violin in his hand, he liked all ears to be focused on him for sure. And he was a gifted and accomplished violinist. We can advance to the next slide. I can now? I can. Actually, that's just our family. There is our next slide. He was a gifted musician. It's not just a proud mom speaking. He actually auditioned for a chair in the orchestra when he had started attending Rutgers University, and he not only got a chair in the undergraduate orchestra that everyone gets into, but he actually got a place in the upper graduate School of Music orchestra, one of only 2 freshmen that were placed in that orchestra. So I do think that speaks to his skills, because I'm not a musician, so I can't really speak to the skills. But other than our small neck of the woods, Tyler was basically unknown. That is until the fall of 2010, when he made those national headlines following a cyberbullying incident that happened as an incoming freshman at Rutgers University. At that point, Tyler's roommate live streamed him in a sexual encounter with another man, and he was sharing a very private moment that should have remained just that, a personal encounter, and sharing it with the entire world, or at least in Tyler's mind, I believe, the entire world, it seemed like. I believe those actions humiliated Tyler in front of his new dorm mates. And the worst part is I believe Tyler's roommate targeted him simply because of his sexual orientation. His God-given trait of being gay, Tyler's roommate used against him to target him and humiliate him in front of his peers. And I'm not even sure why he used that, whether he was trying to make himself feel more cool and more popular, or for what reason, but I don't think he gave a moment's thought or consideration. And I think many youths fall into that trap. They want to rise themselves up above another person, and they'll use whatever difference that person has to humiliate them and to raise above them in that social mechanism and social scale. Unfortunately, because he didn't give much notice or much care about the harm being done, it ended in a tragic situation. Because as Tyler kept reading those jokes and comments on social media, Tyler's reality, I believe, became very twisted and distorted. And he lost sight of just how special and precious he was. And he also lost sight of the resources that he had available to him, because he did. Rutgers had numerous resources that he could have accessed, as well as he had resources at home. But unfortunately, as I've learned personally in my moment of grief and loss, you often can't see those resources when you are in that dark, desperate, lonely place. And that's why we need the help and support of other people. And it was at that point that Tyler made that terrible decision, one we can never go back and change or undo. He made a permanent decision to a very temporary situation, because on September 22nd, 2010, Tyler died by suicide. He was only 18 years old, and as much as Joe and I want to go back and change Tyler's situation, we couldn't. So instead, we put our time and energy into making sure that no one else would ever have to suffer the same pain, shame, and humiliation that Tyler experienced. And of course, we did not do that alone at all, especially not in that moment of such grief and emptiness. But we were surrounded by many, many good people that helped us. And mostly we were surrounded by so many people because there was so much media attention around Tyler's story. And I did want to just share a very short clip that would hopefully give you a little insight as to this media frenzy that actually happened, the media people that were stationed outside our home for weeks. And I'm not sure why, because sadly there are several tragic situations very similar, but for whatever reason it was. So this is the clip, and I need help to share that.
This was a sad day at Rutgers University in New Jersey.
Authorities have now identified the body of Tyler Clementi.
A quiet freshman at Rutgers University, a talented violinist, took his own life
after a sexual encounter with another man was secretly streamed online.
By all accounts, Tyler Clementi was a good-natured soul and mostly kept to himself.
Two witnesses saw Clementi jump off the towering George.
18-year-old will join a disturbing growing trend of young students across the country who are cyberbullied to the point of collapse.
On what had happened at Rutgers University was that we saw many people had seen what was happening to Tyler. There had been many passive bystanders. And that is why we are so passionate about turning those passive bystanders into active upstanders. And of course, we never, ever want anyone coming into harm's way. And And being an upstander means many things to many people. I personally am someone that does not like confrontation, so I needed to have other options for me to go along with this idea, which we came up with because we kept seeing so many witnesses that were being brought up to our attention and to show what had happened as we learned. So we really want everyone to be able to interrupt the situation safely if they feel comfortable doing that, especially if they know the situation and they know the people that are involved. Sometimes it's all about calling out words, racial slurs, homophobic words that, just saying, that's not cool to use those words. If you don't feel safe doing that, you don't know the people, maybe it's even if you want to come beside the person being targeted and just walk them away, get them out of that situation. It's simple, it's easy, especially if we're talking to youth, if it's happening in the schoolyard, bring them over to the library, take them to a different location. And most importantly, we like to make sure the youth know that we need to report the situation to a trusted adult. It's not tattling on someone if you want someone to be safe. It's not outing them if they're part of the LGBTQ community. It's about remembering to keep people safe. But of course, that needs to come in with a culture that wants upstanders in a school community. So it's all about not only shifting individuals, but it's about whole communities. So that when someone does share it with a trusted adult, they know that some appropriate measure is happening and that it's not going to be retaliated on them, for sure. And the third most important, I believe, way to be an upstander is to reach out to the person being targeted. If someone had come beside Tyler, to our knowledge, no one reached out to Tyler, and many people had witnessed what was happening and knew what was happening online and within the Rutgers community that he physically was in. If we make sure that we reach out and make sure they know you're there as a friend, they're not alone, and maybe even to tell them about where to get crisis intervention. There was a crisis center at Rutgers. Maybe someone needed to have to walk Tyler to the center, because there's a whole stigma of shame of going to a place for mental health therapy. And especially in 2010, it was probably even more so than it is today. So I think there's many ways to be an upstander, and it's not a one-and-done thing, but it does help to put your name to a pledge of some sort, and we do have a pledge on our website, and we encourage everyone to go to that website and pledge to be an upstander, because we've reached 1 million people with that pledge, but it's not enough. I mean, there's how many millions of people, billions of people in this world, so we need to reach every person in every classroom, every workplace, and every faith community with our message. And it starts with everyone here, so just keeping that in mind. And so we definitely want someone to intervene safely. But I do think for us, it's more than just about punitive behavior. We want to change behavior. I think if we want to have less aggressive behavior, especially in schools or maybe even in workplaces, we need to replace it with something, and I believe the solution is creating more empathetic behavior. And for us, it's about teaching empathy, especially to our youth, but to everyone. And that's just seeing life through someone else's eyes. Is this a 6 or is this a 9? I suppose it depends on your life circumstances and situation as to where you see that or what you see that as. And we do want our upstander message to spread, because we do believe everyone should be treated online and offline with the same respect and dignity that they deserve. Not because, or actually in despite of our differences, but because all of our differences make us uniquely special and precious, and we believe that those differences must be celebrated. But bullying and aggressive behavior is nothing new. It's been around forever. I was young a long, long time ago, and it was prevalent then as well, but I don't think it was as prevalent as it is today, as well as the fact is that we have a new nuance. We have a new weapon in the arsenal of bullying, and that is the cyber digital world, and that is cyberbullying. And there are a few nuances that make bullying different when it's experienced in this digital world. First of all, there's the volume of people that are seeing the incident or the photo or the words. It's, if it's happening in a classroom, 20, 30 people seeing it, the playground, maybe 50. But online, it can be seen by hundreds or thousands or even more if something goes viral. And I think all of this has a component to why it's so severe in the digital world. Certainly the anonymity that we experience in the digital world, many of the platforms, especially platforms that youth use, you don't have to connect your name to. So people don't even know who's making the comments, which is double-edged, really. It's worse for the targeted person because they don't know who's saying the words or sharing the photos. And it's also in their minds, is it 10 people? If there's 10 comments, there's probably double or triple the number of people that have seen those comments and photos. So it's just exponentially more, the volume is more. And I do think people say things that they wouldn't say face-to-face. If they could see the pain that they're causing in someone's eyes, they would not, I really don't think that they would say, most people would not say those words. So I think it's that anonymity that makes it more complex, the harshness of the words. And what I definitely think happened in Tyler's world is that you can't escape the words on social media. If you were being bullied at school, you could go home to the safety of your house. But when it's online, sometimes the target becomes their own worst enemy, and they continue to log into the words. Tyler continued to log in, and you have to understand this was in 2010, so there were no smartphones. He had a text phone, a flip text phone, but yet he could still say he saved them, and he was receiving, I believe, tweets onto that phone. He figured that out. And then, of course, he had it on his laptop. They did do a forensic examination of his laptop, and they found, it doesn't sound like much, but he went back about at least 70 times or more to those texts or those messages, those instant messages. And that's a lot because he had to be connected to Wi-Fi. So it was a different world back then. So it was definitely heavy on his heart. He took screenshots of the texts. He kept going back to that. That was what was left open on his computer before when he left to go to New York City on September 22nd. So it was definitely weighing heavy on his heart, and I definitely think it plays a strong impact on many people's lives. I also think, my own opinion, is that the cyber world is a very lonely place. And you say that maybe doesn't make sense because you think there's thousands of people in the cyber world. But the people that are in there don't necessarily know you, and you don't know them in a personal manner because they're just names or fictitious names or, whatever they make up as their platform name. And it's just a lonely place. And also the people that do care about you in the physical environment don't know what's happening because it's here on your phone or on your laptop. In my day, in the good old days, my house phone was connected to the kitchen wall, and there were a cord attached to it, and it usually, if someone called me, someone else answered it in my house, and then they would call me to the phone. So my parents or my brother knew who I was talking to. They saw or heard half of the conversation. They knew if I was upset or just disturbed by something or happy by something and could follow up with it. And at least there was a connection to people that cared about you. But now you keep reading and going down that rabbit hole in the digital world, and the people that care most about you don't really know what's happening to you. But of course, the digital world can be a strong place of support. I mean, there's lots of supportive people, and especially I know some people from the LGBTQ community find support in that space, especially if they don't find it in their physical world. So it is a double-edged sword, and if it's used for the good that it was created for, then I do believe that that's very good and very positive. But we have to make sure that it's used for good and not used to harm people, as in Tyler's situation and so many other youth that I've spoken to and parents that I know, because the phone is a powerful tool. And it's simple. We don't just hand over the car keys to our youth and say, go have a good ride. You know, we train them. We give them driver's ed. We go behind the wheel. They get a learner's permit. But unfortunately, in so many cases, we just kind of give them a phone, and they don't have good digital citizenship. And that's some of the things that we need to truly promote. So I do think it's important that we kind of tame that Wild West of this generation and use the digital world for good. I know that we need to always choose our words wisely on social media, and our youth are watching us too. And I know there's a lot of like-minded people from me, and they attack other people that don't have views. I mean, like mine or theirs, and I think we have to be cautious of that because our youth learn our behaviors. We're role models, so we need to be good role models in that respect and talk civilly and respectfully in all our spaces. That, I think, is key. And also, if you do see something or you do write a message out of anger or frustration, I always encourage everyone before they hit that send button to stop and take a moment and breathe and reread what they've written and make sure that it's sending out encouragement and support into the world. And if it's not, if it's harmful or has a potential to harm somebody or has a potential to be misunderstood, because that is easily happen, I do encourage you to rewrite it or maybe just to delete it altogether. I do think that that is super important. But one of the also things that I've learned is that in this world, in this current time we live in, the inevitability of being cyberbullied is very real. Statistically speaking, we're going to encounter that. So I think we all need to be proactive to knowing how we're going to deal with something, because there's so much in life that happens that is out of our control. But the one thing we do have control over is our response. And so I think in a moment of frustration or anger, we want to make sure we have mechanisms in place. And because it's important to make sure that we change behavior, because hurt people often hurt people. I forgot that slide was there, sorry. But we do have help if you need talking points to have conversations, especially with youth, because youth are a little more impulsive than adults sometimes. And so if you need talking points, it's about, we have them online, because we need to prepare youth and make sure that they know that it's okay for them to come to us. Because research shows, and we partnered with AT&T and found out of a small sampling, 70% of youth who were targeted would not reach out to their adult parent for help. Some stated it was because they thought they didn't know anything about the cyber world, but they do know something about human nature and about dealing with difficult people, and that needs to be conveyed to them. And the other most prevalent reason why that youth wouldn't share it is because they were fearful that they would lose their device. Losing a device is not the answer to a cyberbullying situation. Blocking the comments, yes. Reporting it through platforms, yes. Taking screenshots, yes. But you got to get out of that downward cycle of reading those comments, but you don't need your device taken, because there is the positive side of the support that you can find on that platform. So it's a delicate balance, but it is all about talking to people and communicating. So I think at this point, I just do want to, because I know my time is limited, I'm getting there. I do want just to raise awareness of some of the things that we work on from our foundation. We have a plethora of information to go on our website. We expanded on our Upstander Pledge by creating a Day One initiative or program. It's about really a code of conduct. It's about setting limits from day one and moving on from there and creating a culture of being upstanders. We also have a great youth ambassador program. We're always looking for youth between 13 and 18. We just started a cohort, but if we have enough interest, we'll do a second one in September. So tell all your friends, all your young people friends about our youth ambassador program. There is a piece of legislation that is was introduced the last time in 2019, so it needs to be reintroduced into Congress, called the Tyler Clementi Higher Education Anti-Harassment Act, and it focuses more on colleges and universities and creating safe environments for those students, because bullying behavior doesn't magically disappear at 18, when you turn 18. So it's into college years, and well, behavior couldn't continue if we don't change it, and change is most important. We also feel that there's sometimes bullying from the pulpit as well, and that was very important in Tyler's life. So I want to address that and create safe spaces within faith communities. And then there's this beautiful piece of music that was gifted to us called Tyler's Suite, and I'm going to explain more about Tyler's Suite if you come back to hear the performance, which is going to happen in about an hour, hour and a half. And I strongly encourage you to come back, or to stay and listen, or come back on Monday evening, because it is a beautiful piece of music. And it was gifted to us by the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus and 6 other gala choruses, and they reached out to Stephen Schwartz, and he helped us cultivate a whole group of gifted and talented composers that each wrote a movement, and there's 9 movements to the piece, to the song cycle. So please stay and listen and come back, and I'll tell you more about that song cycle. But it's always important to know what your next steps could be, or should be, because hearing me speak, or even better, hearing that beautiful piece of music that resonates deep within you, should call you to action. It shouldn't just be something that you come and sit and listen and, okay, that was nice. Because I think words and statistics help change people's, ideas, and certainly stories. Us starting the foundation and using Tyler's story, we're hoping to change hearts. But I think music is even more powerful, and it reaches deep down into your soul, and hopefully will elicit change. So please join our Upstander movement. That's for us. We definitely think that is very important. Oh, and there's the QR code that I thought was before. So you can even hover your phone on that, and takes you right to our pledge, but it's also in the back of the bulletin I think you're going to get later, your program. So that's good. And if you happen to be in New York City, I'm really good at advertising. I have 3 minutes, so I can advertise. New York in the fall is very nice, I must admit. We have our annual New York City fundraiser is on October 19th. And if you need a physical reminder, I love having physical reminders, because I need to jog my mind. We have bracelets out in the back. They're our Tyler Clementi Foundation bracelets, and we chose the color yellow to help us remember the golden rule. Do to others as you'd remember, as you'd want someone to do to you. And that's not just something that's simple. It's actually spoken about in all the major religious tenets or faith systems. There is some component of the golden rule, hence why it's gold. It's very valuable, and it's a simple lesson. And so if you take a bracelet and remember that golden rule. And of course, we always want people to use social media wisely and for good. And of course, that is to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and repost and put goodness and kindness out into the social media world, not just angry comments of discord. We have to build unity. We're not, like I said before, we're not all going to agree on practically anything in life, but we have to learn to be respectful of other people's opinions, and share positivity into the world. So I think I'm actually 5 minutes early, but I was trying to get there in time, so Alex is keeping me on task. So I am done, and I thank you so much. I think there's going to be question and answers, but I think there's something in between that. So I'm going to turn it over. Oh, so there's also these, I forgot. That's why I keep my props and I don't even use them. So this is our pledge, and that's actions. No, grace.
Thank you, Jane. Just a reminder, each week our program that is recorded and rebroadcast on KKFI, and we thank them for their support of the program. And speaking of support, we take up an offering at this point. Generally, our offering goes to pay the expenses of the forum, but today's offering will go to the Friends of the Forum Endowment Trust to show our appreciation to them for funding this series of events, for making it possible for us to bring Jane in for the series. I want to remind you that the performance following today's forum will be here in Bragg. There will be an offering at that time that will be to support the music program for their involvement in bringing this program together. That musical program will also be featured tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. It will be preceded by a conversation with Jane in which we can explore in depth more of the things that she raised today and her experience going through this event and the work of the foundation. So I would encourage you to come to that if you're interested in learning more about all of that. And that offering at that time Monday evening will go to support the work of the foundation. Next week, our program will be on caring for our animal friends, and Kyle Gabrielson from the Great Plains Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals will be our featured speaker at that time. We turn now to the Q&A portion of the program. If you're with us online, we encourage you to post your questions in the chat, and we have someone who's monitoring that and will be your proxy for those questions. Please remember these rules for the questions. Come to the microphone to ask your question so that everyone can hear it. Speak clearly into the microphone. One question per person until everyone's had the opportunity to ask a question. And please, these are questions, not comments or commentary. You may have something interesting to say, but we really want to hear what our speaker has to respond to the questions. Thank you. Jefferson.
I'd like to hear their comments. Hi, I'm back.
First, please accept my deepest condolences for your loss, and I also want to commend you for this tremendous work that you've taken on. And my question involves, how can parents decide a meaningful line between monitoring their children's activities online and making them feel overwhelmed by parental supervision? How can they decide where that line is?
Thank you, and that's a very individual, case-by-case answer, but I do think that if we start young, as we hand our devices over, I think it's just a normal parental guidance. As I said, you don't just hand over the car keys. It's a progressive, maybe even where they're sharing a social media platform with you. Maybe it's where it just becomes routine. At the end of the day, you share the phone experience together to see the comments, to see the text, and have a conversation around those texts. I think it's also in the approach of a parent. It's like, let's share our day and see how your texts or your emails, your school situation, how the events how you respond to those events. I think it's a normal part of parenting and a youth experience. And then as they get older, I wouldn't start that with an 18-year-old, but I would start that with a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. As soon as, and believe it or not, I do see youth who are 5 and 6 who are have their own cell phones and devices, hopefully with parental guidance and controls on it. But also, I know we did a survey to see, because really the parents of this generation were the first generation to have experienced the internet. It was a new phenomena in my life, so we wanted to see how many of them allowed their children to be connected. And some as young as 2 and 3 were given devices that had no parental controls in this world, and that is a problem. And we also have found, research has found that having too much screen time and not having enough interaction, social interaction with peers and adults is detrimental to one's development of their brain. So, I mean, there's a lot of research out there, and I think it's something that parents young parents today are very aware of?
Hi, I'm Ashley.
Hi, Ashley.
I wanted to also say, as somebody who has lost a son, I followed the story, and I think you're a wonderful human being. My question is similar, but what advice, knowing now, would you give to parents, including me, who are sending their LGBTQ kids off to college this year? And do you have any advice for the level of involvement versus the level of stepping back and allowing them? Because that's where I'm stuck. How do you monitor now as they're older versus, I grew up with technology. I'm totally, but that's my question.
Yeah, well, Gen Z or Gen,
Well,
what is that?
I'm a Zennial.
Oh, okay.
So
These terms aren't
I'm
really.
40 and she's
Okay.
20, and so yeah.
Well, you look really good. And that is definitely a difficult place to bridge. And I don't like giving advice, but I can share things that I've learned. But first of all, making sure that the school that they're going off to, it has safe spaces and has active LGBTQ community within this school. And you can even find that on some online through a campus portal. There's an organization that ranks colleges for safe schools. And it's campus something, and it's in North Carolina. But yes, and which is what surprises many people, because I have met many people who are part of the LGBTQ community that went to Rutgers and they found that it wasn't, but yet Rutgers always scores high because they have everything in place. But what I like to remember too is your peers that are coming to a school are coming from all over, from all different cultures and communities. And they don't just step on a campus that's affirming and has all these safety nets and adhere to that, code of conduct. But it is about having a code of conduct and making sure that schools have code of conduct. Even high schools should have a code of conduct, I believe. And it should be very visible, and students should know, what does that school value? Does it value leadership? Does it value trust? Does it value empathy and compassion? I think it needs to be called out. That's part of our Day One program, is calling all that out, as well as making sure they're connected to those organizations. But it's not a magic wand. From what I've been told, Tyler did connect to the LGBT and on-campus club activity, and he went to 2 or 3 meetings already, and he had made some connections, but it wasn't enough. And it's about checking in. And it's individual. I know some youth go off to college. So I had some coworkers and peers, and their kids called them every day or every 2 days. My children did not like to do that. None of my children like to do that. From the oldest to the second, and my husband at the time didn't think it was necessary. Give them some space. Don't be such a helicopter mom. And I'm like, oh, that's the delicate balance. So if your child is willing to share, that is fantastic. As well as there is space for each person has space that they don't share with everyone. And I've learned that as well. Tyler, he did hide himself very well. Lots of aspects of him that I learned after the fact. And that is very heartbreaking for a mom to know. But we all do that, right? As we mature, and parents have to keep that in mind. And we did that as well until something tragic happens. But it's about giving the support and making sure a child knows that support is there. I think so. Thank you.
Hi, Jane. I would like to ask
Hi.
you about the music tax tweets.
Oh, yes.
And it's very personal and spirited, it seems, and it's understanding of Tyler and the people who loved him. And I'm wondering about the creative process with the musicians, the composers. They clearly understood him, got to know. How were you and his family involved in that process? How'd that go?
Sure. So I am going to talk a little later about that too, but I'd be more than happy to talk now. So when the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus reached out to us, it was about an ongoing process. And we really had a very vague idea. It was nothing like the end product. But one of the things eventually got now whittled down to was that there would be one librettist, and for all but the last movement, Pamela Stewart was the librettist, the person that wrote the words. And she did come and meet with us at our home in Ridgewood. She met initially with a part-time executive director we had and my older son, James, in New York City for a brief meeting, and then the next day she came to our home in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and met with the four of us. I have two other sons, and my husband at the time, and myself. And we spent time together around the table, sharing about Tyler, and then she spent time individually with us. So it definitely is very personalized to Tyler and our experiences at the time. And each piece has a connection to us and to Tyler, starting from the brothers piece. Are you in the chorus? So you know all the movements, okay. So I don't have to remember all the names. So the brothers piece, actually my son, and it started as like 4 movements, and then it grew because then Lance's horns, they wanted Nolan Gasser to do it instead of Lance, because they didn't like what Lance wrote. So that then we wanted Lance to be part of it, because that was, out of the composers at the time, we actually knew Lance before because he was a good friend of Stephen Guy, our executive director. So then he, Pam wrote an additional song. And then Stephen Schwartz thought, no, we need something to talk about the brothers. So James, my older son, had written a piece called Letters to My Brother that was published in Out magazine at the time, and Stephen had read that, and so he's like, yeah, so he used that to inspire that piece. The father's song, Just a Boy, Joe actually had written a poem in that time, and he handed it to Pam, and Pam took that back, and that was pretty much incorporated from what his poem was. And then, so it was from stories. They wanted a whimsical piece. So Pamela didn't know exactly where she was going to go with that whimsy. But we talked a lot about, in middle school, Tyler enjoyed riding on a unicycle, and he taught 2 of his friends, and they would ride around our neighborhood on this unicycle. And then that wasn't enough, and he started playing the violin while he rode the unicycle. So she took that back, but while she was standing on the street corner in New York City waiting for the bus to come pick her up to take her back to the airport, there down the avenue of New York City came someone riding a unicycle. And Pam thought, pay attention to this. This is important. And she got back, and then she wrote the piece about the unicycle. So, yeah, there is strong connection to Tyler and to our family and to where we lived. So, and she honored that very well, even though the one stipulation from the start was I didn't want anything about the final moments. I didn't want anything to include a bridge. And at the end piece, there is a bridge involved. Interestingly, she was able to bring me along to show me she had read a poem by a Jewish rabbi from the late 1800s, and that was the essence of the poem. I don't know if she took all the words, and how it was not only a bridge had many ideas and many visions, and it could be a bridge to bring people together, and that on the sides are all the hardship, but we can go together across the hardship and pain. And I liked that. So then she said, okay, good, then we can include a bridge. And I was like, yeah, okay, you can include a bridge. And it's a beautiful piece, as they all are. So I think I covered a lot of that. Thanks.
Good morning, Jane.
Good morning.
My question is comparing cyberbullying to bullying that has probably been around almost as long as the human species has been around. And in fact, a lot of the mass shootings we hear about at the schools did not involve cyberbullying. So do you think, first of all, how is cyberbullying different? And what impact is it having that's different than the impact of being bullied in the classroom? And do you think that Tyler would have reacted differently if it was not over the internet? And the other thing is, was he out before to anybody before this happened, before the two roommates did this? Or was this, what was the status at that time?
Yes, there's a lot of questions in there. I'll start from the most last one because it's easiest, is he had just started the coming out process. He came out to myself and then to my husband at the time the night before he left for school. or the day before that, yeah. So like within 24 hours before he left for school. He did join some of those meetings of the LGBTQ club that was being met on campus, so he was starting to come out at school. He also had come out to my older son, who's also gay, in the summer, which I didn't know until after the fact, so they were out to each other. So it's a process of coming out, and he was starting it, but certainly, and I think there were other components to it. Certainly, he was being outed, but I think part of it is it's a humiliating, shameful situation. I wouldn't want myself webcammed and Zoomed, sent over the network, myself having sex with someone. I think most people fall into that category. So I think there's a lot of nuances to what was happening. We certainly, because it was perceived by many that they were outing Tyler, which in some respects they were, we as a family were certainly warmly welcomed into the LGBTQ community, and I am very grateful for that and have been supported by the LGBTQ community. And the nuances, I think I enumerated some of them before about the speed that things are transmitted and the anonymity and the process that it's seen by so many and you can't escape it. And I do think that accentuates the damage and the harm of someone where they feel like they've lost control and they don't know where to turn. And I think that all plays a part in the bullying scenario. I also think you're right. Bullying has happened for a long time. And obviously, I think the punitive aspect of, 3 strikes and you're out of a school, or how to deal with a bullying situation hasn't worked in the past. And that's why I think we need to find new ways of dealing with bullying. I'm all about behavior modification. And I do think that we need to certainly have boundaries of what is and is not acceptable behavior. And then when you cross the boundary, instead of having an investigation done and it growing, just having the role models and the adults in the situation, whether it be a professional as an educator, or maybe it's a lunchroom aide, or maybe it's the bus driver. I think having those staff in place that have had DEI training and are aware of calling out the bad behavior, and that's start of the initial steps of behavior modification. I also think it's about increasing cultural emotional learning in our schools. I think certainly about sharing stories is key. I think there's so much that we can learn from sharing stories. I think part of it is that we can learn that we can identify differences, but we can also share the fact that within those differences we have a lot of similarities, and we all have the same emotional need not to be shamed and not to feel alone, and not to be called out, but to be embraced and celebrated for who we are. And I think by reading those stories and including inclusive curriculums, DEI curriculums, it's essential not only for the LGBTQ plus community, but for racial issues and immigration issues, all the issues that we face in our world that are separating us into two camps in this country. I think that is what we need more in our schools, more inclusiveness. So less bills that want to ban books and less bills that want to say, don't say gay kind of headlines for those legislative bills. I think that would have a greater impact than just building on the anti-bullying Bill of Rights in most states.
Good morning, Jane.
Good morning. An easy one, I hope.
Yeah, maybe so. I'm trying to find out, does the foundation in any way back, or do you have any opinion on how things have come forward in finding the culpability of cyberbullies in the deaths of their victims where there have been prosecutions?
Yes, we don't track that necessarily, but we have been participating in some class action suits against platforms specifically that make them be held accountable, because it is also about accountability, for sure. And some of the platforms, they profess to claim that they will reveal identities or they'll block posts or comments, and in fact, they do not. So it's all about making sure, I believe, our youth do not participate in anonymous apps at all. Those are like the deadliest traps in the digital world. But it's hard because when all their friends are on the app in that platform, to be the only one excluded is difficult. So it's almost about parents banding together to making sure all of their students or a school community leading the charge of saying, you know, we're not going to participate on these anonymous apps, and we're not allowing these apps on our students' phones, which is difficult to do for sure. But it is a step, and there is legislation, even state legislation, federal legislation that's moving forward to hold those platforms more accountable. Yes, Alex?
A related question. I think people will be curious about the outcome of this case relative to Tyler's roommate and what happened there, if you don't mind sharing that.
Sure. The outcome. It's a complicated outcome. Needless to say, like the whole subject. So because there were criminal laws broken, there was a criminal case against Tyler's roommate. But the laws were invasion of privacy, tampering with evidence, minor laws. The fact that Tyler was part of a protected class, part of the LGBTQ community, and that it was connected to a sexual act, it did elevate those crimes from a misdemeanor to a more higher, like a felony, right? I'm not a lawyer, but I did learn a little bit. Of course, because if they were all just misdemeanors, it would not have escalated even to a trial. Of course, there were 15 counts because it was against Tyler as well as the person that Tyler was with, who remained anonymous because that person was not out at the time to his family. So the trial lasted over 3 weeks, just over 3 weeks with the verdict, and the verdict was that the roommate was found guilty on all 15 counts, and he was sentenced to a $10,000 fine and a month in community jail. The prosecutor thought that was outrageous, and they appealed the verdict, but of course the defense also appealed the verdict as well. The prosecutor appealed the sentence, and the defense appealed the verdict. So it went to the appeals court in New Jersey. And also I will say that there were 2 other people because Tyler's roommate initially set up the camera on his computer, which was not like today's Zoom, where we all understand that. This was really high technology in 2010. You have to understand that. I wouldn't have known that that little green dot meant that there was a camera on you, or that you could click into someone's chat and turn it on in your place. So this was really cutting edge at the time. But they did go to another room across the hall because unfortunately, again, circumstances, my older son used to say, it was the imperfect storm that kind of brewed around Tyler. Being a state school, there were lots of people from New Jersey at the school. From where we lived in northern New Jersey, I think only 3 or 4 people from Tyler's class went to that incoming freshman class. But West Windsor was very close to New Brunswick, and there were many students from West Windsor. And unfortunately, Tyler was placed in a dorm that had a common space in 2 sides, and on the one side where Tyler was, almost every room knew each other because they were all from West Windsor. It was a weird fluke that happened. So they did go across the room, and there were 2 other people that also had charges or had been arrested, but they turned state's evidence, so they had a plea deal. So there was multiple levels. So on appeal, when it was appealed, one of the bias crime laws had been changed in New Jersey. It was actually based on a case that was unrelated to LGBTQ. It was about race. It was a racial issue, and it had changed the law from the perceived, the targeted persons perceived that it was being caused against them because of the marginalized class that they belonged to, whether it was Tyler being gay or this other person being black. And because it changed, that definitely discarded that 1 count of bias. And the appeals judge kind of discharged all of the bias crimes. And the prosecutor was very surprised when that happened. But I was in the courtroom, and I was like, you said yes when he asked you that question. And she was like, no, I didn't. I was like, yeah, I heard it. But I just view that it was time to move on. I think it happened in 2014, maybe 15, but we have to review that because we had different dates, Alex and I. But it was time to let go of the trial and to move forward in being more proactive and promoting upstanders and making inclusive communities. And, you know, there's a place for the law, but the law isn't everything because we need to change hearts and minds, and the law is not going to do that. So thank you.
An article about tribalism in America, and he pointed out that one tribe has kind of a libertarian or Ayn Rand point of view, and that they think that the meek shall inherit the consequences of their being meek. And how do you suppose we could essentially cause people in America to realize that the meek are their friends, and that they don't need to be thought of as an enemy?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably a question that's way above my mentality. But we definitely have, in some way, formed 2 different camps, and we have to learn to bridge that with communication and respect. That's my whole answer to that, and it's probably very inadequate, but thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention. And I do think that my time is up. Is it not, Alex?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'm going to take my ribbon.
Good idea. A reminder, in 15 minutes in this room, we'll start the service for the day, and that will be the music that Jane talked about. That, again, reminder also happened tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. In the lobby are materials that Jane brought regarding the foundation and these bracelets. And also in the lobby are materials for local resources. I don't know if you know, but the 3 major hospital systems in Kansas City all have LGBTQ clinics for youth. So those materials are available in the lobby. I would encourage you to look at those and make those resources available to family and friends that you know. We thank you for joining us today and look forward to you continuing your presence. Thank you.